When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands that
sailors and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force.
Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the founding fathers. Not
one small step for man. Those three hallowed words reverently dictate what you ought to be, what you can be, what you will be.
we pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.
Hey, welcome to Our Republic. I am the non-parader, your host, Jeff, the non-operating operator, the one who liked to play pretend in the Army National Guard. Welcome to the show, Our Republic. Today, we are talking about the road to independence and why 1776 mattered. So, ladies and gentlemen, history nerds, people who just wandered in here because their Spotify auto playlist betrayed them, welcome back. Today we're diving actually into why 1776 mattered. And spoiler alert, it's not just because America got a really cool, expensive birthday party with fireworks. Nope. It's because everything leading up to that year was like a slow motion car crash. Okay? Everybody saw it coming. Everybody knew it was going to be ugly, and then boom, 1776. Independence, revolution, and a whole new nation. So hold tight, grab a chair, maybe a snack, because we're about to go walk the long and messy road that got us here. And like any great road trips, there will be wrong turns, angry yelling, and at least one person trying to throw tea out the window. And that won't be me, actually. I've got my delicious hot cinnamon spice here in my really, really cool, what they call thermos? I don't know, drinky thingy. Anyway, it's really cool. It's like the little tube that grenades come in. I got it at the commissary up on the post. Anyway, it won't be me throwing tea. I like it too much. Anyway, let's get into the seeds of the revolution. Here's the thing. America just didn't wake up one morning and say, you know what? Screw Great Britain. Let's do our own thing. Now, this was decades in the making, actually. The colonies were basically Britain's kids, raised in the empire's house, eating its food, speaking its language, wearing its hand-me-down clothes. But by the 1760s, those kids wanted to move out, and Dad, King George III, was like, not a chance, you're not ready. It's kind of like what I would say to my kid if he was trying to move out at 14 years old. I tell him all the time, I'm like, well, you may live in a constitutional republic, but in this house, it's a tyranny. It's a tyranny. I'm basically Joe Biden, and you're the United States. That's what I actually tell my kids. You can like that, you can not like it, I don't give a rip. Anyway, and King George wasn't that cool kind of dad. He was the kind of dad that grounds you for breathing too loud. That's actually me. You know, my kid will be playing music while he's in the bathroom, and I'll be like, I will call him on the phone and be like, turn the music down, stop singing. See? I'm King George in this household. But anyway, the tensions built after the French and Indian War, which was from 1754 to 1763, and Britain wins, but it's broke at the end of the war. So Parliament says, hey, colonies, you benefited, so why don't you pay the tab? And the colonists were like, come again? No. We fought too, and you never asked. Again? Boom! Resentment starts building. And that brings us to the tax tantrums, part one. You got the Stamp Act, which is 1765. Tax on paper goods, newspapers, playing cards, legal documents. Colonists hated it. I think that as Americans, we just hate taxes as it is. Then you got the Townshend Act, which is in 1767. Taxed imports like glass, lead paint, paper, tea, basically everyday stuff. It's basically Britain saying, let's look around the colonies, and what do people touch most? Great, tax that. It's kind of like modern-day Democrats. And then what happens? Protests turn violent, right? We get the Boston Massacre, which is 1770. So let's do this. Picture Boston, March 5th, 1770. Tensions have been simmering for years. Taxes, soldiers quartered in homes, right? The quartering started a little bit earlier than when the intolerable acts were mentioned. It was a little different. Colonists started feeling like second-class citizens. And a group of colonists started heckling a church, started heckling British soldiers. I mean, they weren't just from a church. They were also normal-day citizens, but we're gonna actually talk about the Boston Tea Party, or the Boston Massacre later, because one of the pastors we're going to be talking about like trained his church. So anyway, I believe that's the one. It could be the Battle of Lexington. I don't remember. Anyway, we'll get there, and you'll know when we get there, and I will inform you when you get there. Just let's move along. A group of the colonists started heckling British soldiers, snowballs, rocks, trash talk, the works, good American things to do to the British. And the crowd begins to grow, and like normal British people do, they panic, and then bang, shots are fired. And when the smoke cleared, 5 colonists are dead, including Crispus Attucks, a man of African and Native descent who's remembered as the first casualty of the Revolutionary War. And we're going to actually talk a little bit more about Crispus Attucks. Attucks. Hey, let's do it again, right? How do we say this? Ready? Here we go. Attucks. There we go, right? So this is the great thing about computers, right? If we pronounce something wrong, we can get it. Now, some people would say that 5 people killed isn't a massacre, right? By body count, not really, right? 5 people, but perception is everything. Samuel Adams and Paul Revere jumped right on it. And Revere cranks out the famous engraving of the soldiers lined up like they're mowing down innocent civilians at a parade. Instant propaganda. The colonists are furious. Britain looks like a bully, and the trust between them absolutely shatters. And that brings us to the tax tantrums part 2, which I think these tax tantrums I throw some tax tantrums currently as well. I just watched current tax tantrums in Oregon. $5 billion worth of taxes. Ridiculous. They should be throwing tantrums. Anyway, the Tea Act of 1773. Tea is taxed, right? Colonists snapped. The result, the Boston Tea Party. Colonists dress up like Native Americans, like you do. Excuse me. Boarded ships and dumped 92,000 pounds of tea in the Boston Harbor. Now, my cousin, Bear, an incredible man, love him, he's basically my brother, was in Boston. And in commemoration, like a bunch of other individuals do, he had a tea bag and threw it into the harbor. And it was British tea. God bless that man. Anyway, Britain called it vandalism, and Americans called it a pool party with better costumes, right? This is the preamble to hot dog barbecues, beer, and American flag tank tops, right? Like this 4th of July, I had this awesome fanny pack from Shields that had a bunch of cup holders on it. And it's American. It's like red, white, and blue with stars and stripes and says USA on it. It's amazing. It's amazing. And bring us to the Intolerable Acts. 1774. Britain cracks down even harder. Closes Boston Harbor, restricts Massachusetts government. Officials were taken from America and tried in Britain, right? Places they've never even been, right? And forces the colonists to quarter British troops again, right? It's like grounding your kid and then making them pay rent for the babysitter that you hired to watch them. Okay, do you understand that one, right? Grounding your kid and then making them pay rent for the babysitter you hired to watch them. But by now, the colonists aren't just annoyed, they're furious. Boycotts spread, people smuggle goods to avoid taxes, and militias start training, just in case. And then the clash turns bloody. This is Lexington and Concord, 1775. April 1775, the British hear that the colonists are stockpiling weapons in Concord, Massachusetts, and General Gage sends troops to confiscate them. But word gets out, thanks to Paul Revere and his midnight ride, and the militias spring into action. The first confrontation is at Lexington. Rexington. Oh, the first confrontation is at Rexington. Anyway, a ragtag group of militia and farmers with muskets face off against trained British soldiers. No one knows who fired the first shot, although we all know it was the British, because up to that point, we're going to talk about this later, the pastors were actually teaching the individuals that were there in the militia that the only way that the Lord will protect the United States, it wasn't the United States yet, but the colonies, is if the British fired the first shot and we did it in self-defense. Now you wonder where that whole Geneva Convention is like you don't fire unless fired upon. It's from that. They taught that the only way the Lord would protect and guide us through this combat or this war, potential war, is if we did not fire the first shot and it was in self-defense. So most of the colonies believed the British did fire the first shot. Okay. Several, Bullets were flying, 8 colonists dead, and the British march on to Concord, only to find even more militia waiting. And there's actually a gentleman I can't wait to talk about with the Lexington battle. He was 80 years old. No, how old was he? 80. And by himself fought 5 British people. That's all I'm going to say. But I cannot wait to talk about this gentleman because his story is awesome. Anyway, that'll be during the providence of the Lord during the war revolutionary thing. We're going to talk about Lexington a little bit more in detail. Anyway, bridges are blocked in Concord. Skirmishes break out. And when the Redcoats finally retreat back to Boston, they're harassed the entire way by militia shooting from behind trees and stone walls, right? Like, this is Mel Gibson shooting, right? The hot shot heard. This is the shot heard around the world, not because it echoed that far, but because it marked the start of open war. Let's go to Bunker Hill, 1775. 2 months later, June 17th, 1775. The British tried to dislodge colonial forces dug in on Breed's Hill just outside Boston. The colonists are undersupplied. They're running low on ammo. And their commanders tell them, don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes. That's the famous, Anyway, we're going to talk about Bunker Hill a little bit more in detail later as well. The British charge once. Nope, they charge twice. And each time the colonists mow them down. On the third charge, the militia finally runs out of gunpowder and has to retreat. And technically, that is a British victory, right? What did I say we do? We know, we perceive, we defend, and assert. They knew the enemy was coming. They perceived their rights were being violated. They defended those rights, but then they ran out of powder. So they went on the defense. They went back until they could get reorganized and attack again, right? That's classic. I love it. American way. Anyway, they held the hill at the end. The British won, and they held the hill at the end. But it came at a staggering cost. Over 1,000 British soldiers were killed or wounded compared to the 400 colonists. And that, in my opinion, is a colonist's win. The message is clear, right? At this point, the message is clear. This isn't just some pushover militia. These farmers can fight and fight hard. But by the time Bunker Hill wrapped up, there was no putting this genie back in the bottle, right? Shots had been fired, blood had been spilled, and both sides knew this wasn't just political arguing anymore. This was all-out war. And the colonies are divided. Some still want reconciliation. Others, they're just done, right? Independence is moving from a widespread idea to a serious option, right? So let's look at it again, like in a whole broad picture, right? Why did 1776 matter? So 1776 mattered because that's when the colonists finally cut the cord. Before 1776, most colonists technically called themselves loyal subjects of the king. Angry subjects, sure, but still subjects, right? July 1776, Jefferson writes the Declaration of Independence. Congress debates, edits, signs, and suddenly they're not rebels anymore. They're a new nation. And this just wasn't some polite note. It was 27 paragraphs of brutal roasting. Our next episode is on the writing of the Declaration of Independence. It said King George is a tyrant, Parliament is a tyrant, and Britain is abusing us. Jefferson basically wrote the world's first breakup text, breakup via text. I mean, that's what he really, really did. He's like, it's not me, it's you. And why it mattered, it united the colonies, right, under one mission. It told the world America wasn't a rebellion, it was a nation. And it gave, excuse me, my tea is making me burpy. It gave the revolution an ideological backbone, right? Liberty, natural rights, and self-government. I'm getting that finger thing down, right? Like we talked last time. Okay. Behind the scenes, the Declaration wasn't smooth. And that's we're going to do that in episode 6. We're going to talk about the draft. It's pretty good. I get to actually see it on Saturday, the draft, the day that the episode on the draft of the Constitution, I get to actually see the real draft. I'm really excited. Anyway, and I'll film and show videos and stuff. I'll put that up, at some point. But anyway, Jefferson drafted it, but John Adams and Benjamin Franklin made the edits, right? Congress debated for days. They cut about a quarter of Jefferson's draft, including a whole section blaming King George for slavery. And on July 4th, Congress approved the final text. Copies were rushed out to be printed, and a few weeks later, the famous signing parchment was ready. And remember, every signer knew that they were risking their necks. If the revolution failed, their names were a hit list, right? It's like Chris Pratt's terminal list, right? For Britain, and the other way around. So 1776 just wasn't another year. Without it, the revolution looks just like a bunch of angry colonists dodging taxes, and with it, it became a fight for principles, right? Soldiers just weren't fighting for cheaper imports. They were fighting for independence, for liberty, for a shot at something new, right? And that's why historians actually call 1776 the point of no return. Once those words were written, there was no going back. And so 1776 matters because it's the year America stopped being an angsty teenager and decided to move out for good. The Declaration of Independence wasn't just words. It was a golden ticket to legitimacy, survival, and freedom. It wasn't just fireworks and a holiday. It was a year the underdogs went all in, signed their names, and somehow won. Anyway, that's it. That's why 1776 mattered. Nice little short episode here. Thanks for watching. And if you enjoyed this, please tell your friends. And remember, history isn't boring unless you let your textbooks tell you all about it. I will see you next time.